Researchers put 188 adults in either a clean room or a messy room and told them to come up with creative ideas. The number of ideas came out about the same either way. But when independent judges read all the ideas without knowing where they came from, the messy room ideas won on originality every single time. We've been taught that a clean desk equals a successful life, but the person with the color-coded files has often done the most organized nothing of their whole week. In a messy space, your brain stops taking the safe path and starts making connections it normally wouldn't. And it turns out some of history's biggest winners already knew that. Einstein, Twain, Edison, Jobs. These are exactly the people we're talking about. Picture yourself walking into Einstein's office at Princeton, and your first thought is, whoever works here can't find anything. Papers stacked so high they're basically load-bearing walls. Books shoved in every direction with no system a normal person could decode. You'd assume the guy inside was one bad day away from an intervention, not the person who figured out how space and time actually work. Einstein himself put it best. If a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, then what is an empty desk a sign of? That gap right there is what we're talking about. There's a photo of Einstein's desk taken the day he died, and it looks exactly like that. Total paper chaos, no visible order, nothing that looks like a filing system. Edison's workspace looked like someone had sneezed patents all over every flat surface in the building. Twain wrote surrounded by what could generously be described as an aggressive yard sale. Jobs spent years obsessing over making products look clean and minimal, but his actual workspace was a total disaster zone. Nothing like the stores selling those products. So you've got four people who built things that genuinely changed how the world runs, and not one of them worked at a desk that would pass a basic inspection. So either they produced all of that output in spite of the mess, which is the boring answer most people default to, or the mess was actually doing something useful for their brains while they were deep inside the work. And the research keeps landing on that second option. Not because mess is magic, but because of what a messy space does to the way your brain processes problems when it's fully occupied with something that actually matters. Think about what all four of those guys had in common. They weren't shuffling paper around to look busy. They weren't performing productivity for anyone. They were buried inside problems that used every bit of their mental bandwidth. And the physical chaos around them was just a side effect of a brain that had better things to do than sort pens by color. The mess wasn't the point. The work was the point, and the mess followed naturally from that. There's even research connecting messier workplaces to higher salaries, which sounds like a joke until you sit with it for a second. The people too consumed with building things and growing their bank accounts to worry about where their stapler landed tend to be the ones actually producing output, not the ones performing the idea of productivity. A tidy desk photographs well. It doesn't always mean anything is getting done. Your internal filing system matters more than your physical one. That means the mental map you carry of where things are, how your ideas connect, and what you worked on 3 days ago that might link to what you're thinking about right now. Edison didn't need his desk to look clean. He needed to know where the half-finished thought from Tuesday was sitting so he could run it into the new idea he'd just had on Thursday morning. That's a completely different kind of organization, and it lives in your head, not on your desk. Most productivity advice gets this completely backwards. It treats a tidy desk as proof that you're serious and ready to work, when for a lot of high-output people, a tidy desk just means they haven't started yet. Cleaning up is something you do when the work is done or when you're avoiding starting it. The clutter that builds up mid-project isn't a character flaw. It's what focus actually looks like from the outside, and what's happening inside your brain when that clutter surrounds you is a lot more specific than most people realize. Here's what that actually looks like inside your brain when the environment shifts. Your brain reads your environment the same way it reads a social situation. Walk into a library, and you automatically get quieter, slower, more careful. Walk into a loud party, and something loosens up. Your workspace does the exact same thing, just with your thinking instead of your volume. A clean, ordered room puts your brain into school uniform mode. It sees the order around it and starts following the rules, sticking to what works, finishing steps in the right sequence. That's a useful mode when you're executing something you already figured out. It's a bad mode when you're trying to figure out something new, because a brain wearing a school uniform doesn't take risks and doesn't make weird connections. It just does what worked last time. A messy room flips that. It's like taking off a tie at the end of a long day. Your brain scans the environment, notices the usual rules aren't being enforced, and quietly shifts into a different gear. It stops filtering out ideas that feel a little too out there and starts actually considering them because the context around it is already saying the normal playbook doesn't apply right now. That shift doesn't feel dramatic from the inside. You're not suddenly a genius. Your brain just stops slamming the door on ideas before they finish forming, and a more interesting version of your thinking starts running instead. Scientists actually paid adults to sit in a messy room and come up with new uses for a ping pong ball, which is honestly a legendary way to spend a research grant. The messy room people didn't just generate more original ideas. They also picked new, untested products more often when given a choice between something familiar and something they'd never tried. Their brains were already in a mode that said breaking from routine was fine, so they kept doing it across every task they were given. The clean room people defaulted to the safe, familiar option almost every time. So the mess isn't making you think faster or work harder. It's changing which type of thinking your brain defaults to, and that difference shows up clearly in the research. The people in the messy room in that study didn't generate more ideas than the people in the clean room. The quantity was basically the same, but the quality was different in a way the judges picked up on every single time, because the messy room ideas kept landing as more original. Not slightly more. Consistently more. The people in that room weren't trying harder or thinking longer. Their brains just stopped defaulting to the safest available answer. Think about how your brain routes itself when you're working on a problem. In a clean room, it takes the highway, fast, direct, well-traveled, and completely predictable. In a messy room, it starts taking side streets, and sometimes a side street connects two places the highway never would have linked. That's literally what's happening when your brain loosens its grip on safe thinking and starts pulling in ideas from directions it would normally ignore. This also explains something a lot of people notice but can't quite name. You feel most creative late at night, or in a coffee shop, or in a hotel room, or in any space that's slightly off from your normal setup. The environment is just different enough from your usual baseline that your brain can't fully settle into its default patterns. That slight wrongness, that small sense of, this isn't quite my normal situation, is enough to keep your thinking loose and open instead of locked into whatever you did last time. So if you sit down to brainstorm something and your first instinct is to clean your desk before you start, you're not setting yourself up to think better. You're literally switching your brain into the wrong mode before the session even begins. Clean spaces are good for executing plans you've already made. They're bad for making the plan in the first place, because a brain that's following rules isn't a brain that's making new ones. The messy room isn't making you smarter. It's making your brain stop playing it safe. And for the idea generation phase of any project, that's exactly the mode you need running. But that creative boost has a very specific breaking point, and once you cross it, the same tool that was helping you starts working against you in ways that aren't always obvious until the damage is already done. There's a version of mess that makes you think better, and there's a version that makes you feel like you're slowly being absorbed by your own apartment. Knowing which one you're currently in is the whole game, and most people never stop to check. The same study that showed messy rooms boosted creative originality also found a real limit to that effect. Your brain registers every single item in its visual field, and once the clutter stops being background noise and starts actively competing for your attention, it flips from a creative tool into a distraction tax. There's only so much filtering your brain can do before it stops spending energy on the work and starts spending it on the mess. And that's a trade you don't want to make without knowing you're making it. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They hear mess boosts creativity and decide to just never clean anything ever again, which sounds like a great system until they're sitting in what can only be described as a biological hazard zone, feeling anxious, unable to locate a single thing they need, and quietly wondering why they haven't finished one task in 2 weeks. That's not creative freedom. That's just entropy winning while you watch. There's a real difference between the creative mind at work kind of mess and the I haven't seen my floor in 3 weeks and I'm starting to think that's fine kind of mess. One builds up naturally because you're deep in something and your brain's fully occupied with the actual work. The other builds up because nothing's getting done and cleaning feels harder than just not looking at it. One's a byproduct of focus. The other is focus's opposite. When clutter crosses from mild visual chaos into genuine stress, your brain doesn't unlock creative thinking anymore. It starts running its threat scanning program instead, and that's not a metaphor. When the mess feels overwhelming rather than comfortable, your brain starts pumping out stress hormones, scanning the room for problems, cataloging everything that's wrong, and quietly calculating how long it would take to fix all of it. That's a completely different use of your mental bandwidth, and none of it's pointed at the work sitting in front of you. So the real problem isn't mess, it's unintentional mess. If your space is chaotic because you're buried in a project and you still know where everything lives, that chaos is working for you. If your space is chaotic because you've genuinely lost track of everything and your chest tightens a little when you sit down to work, that's a problem wearing a tool's clothes, and treating it like a tool will cost you. This also exposes one of the sneakiest procrastination moves out there: cleaning your desk before you start working. It feels productive, it looks productive, and your brain will absolutely tell you it's necessary and that you'll think more clearly once everything's sorted. But if you're doing it to avoid sitting down and actually starting, you've just used tidiness as a procrastination shield, and your brain's genuinely excellent at making that feel completely reasonable. The fix is a two-environment system. When you're generating ideas, let the mild chaos run. When you shift into execution mode and need to actually finish something, you don't need to clean the whole room. Clearing just one corner of your desk is enough to stop your brain from registering all the visual noise and signal that the wandering phase is over. That small patch of calm does the job without burning 20 minutes on a cleaning session that was really just a stall. Your desk isn't a reflection of who you are. It's a setting you can adjust, and adjusting it at the right moment is one of the simplest levers you've got for controlling what your brain actually produces each day. The system is 2 moves. When you're generating ideas, don't clean first. Let the mild chaos run and push your brain off the safe path. When you shift into execution mode, clear one small zone on your desk. Not the whole room, just enough visual calm to help your brain lock onto the specific steps in front of it. Generate in the mess, execute in the clear spot. That's a professional system, not a character flaw, and there's a real difference between the two. One gets results, the other is just owning a flat in Hackney. Einstein's desk wasn't covered in papers because he was failing. It looked like that because he wasn't performing organization for an audience that wasn't there. Your output is the only metric that matters for your financial and professional growth, not how your desk photographs. Drop a comment below with what your desk actually looks like right now. Apply this one step today and track your progress. Subscribe if you want more systems like this.